My parents said they never liked me and I was just their backup plan, until grandpas will expose the truth and destroy their evil scheme. I've been thinking about sharing this for a while now. Fair warning, this is going to be a long one, but trust me, it's worth the read. This one's been sitting with me for a while. I didn't plan on sharing it publicly, but after everything that's happened, yeah, I think it's time. Long post ahead, but I promise it's worth the read. Let's just say my family had a lot of secrets. And when my grandfather passed away, every single one of them came crashing down. I got treated like the spare tire my whole life. Then the will flipped everything. Here's how it all went down. So, let me paint you the picture first. I, 25 male, used to think every kid grew up feeling like a side character in their own house. Turns out most parents at least pretend to love their kids equally. Mine didn't even bother with the pretending part. From day one, it was made crystal clear that I was Plan B, the backup son, the afterthought. Zach, my older brother, 27, male, had the spotlight locked down before I could even walk. He could literally do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Didn't matter what he did, he was always brilliant, driven, unique. He flunked 2 classes back to back in high school and my parents blamed the teachers. Meanwhile, I once got a B in math and suddenly I was slipping and lazy. Got a week of grounding and no internet. Make it make sense, that was pretty much my entire childhood vibe. It wasn't just screaming matches. It was calculated neglect. When I was 9, I broke my arm falling off my bike. My mom was annoyed she had to leave work early. She made me wait in the ER alone for 3 hours while she took Zach to his basketball practice first. Like priorities, right? The nurse kept asking where my parents were. I remember staring at the floor, too embarrassed to explain. My dad was worse in his own way. He'd make these little comments that cut deep. Why can't you be more useful like your brother? Or, Zach never gives us this much trouble. Once when I got an academic award at school, he actually said, even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes, then laughed like it was the funniest joke. My teacher overheard and looked horrified. I just nodded and took it like always. There was this time in middle school when I made the honor roll 3 quarters in a row, brought home the certificate all excited, thinking maybe this time they'd actually care. My dad glanced at it and just said, guess they're letting everyone on these days. Then asked if Zach was home from soccer practice yet. Cool moment. My parents had this weird scoreboard in their heads. Zach breathes. 10 points. I achieved something significant. Maybe a half point if they're feeling generous. I once fixed our washing machine when it broke down. Watched some YouTube videos. Figured it out. Saved them like $200 in repair costs. My dad's response, make sure you put everything back where you found it. Not even a thanks. It was the consistent everyday stuff that really got to me. The way they'd interrupt me mid-sentence, but hang on Zach's every word. How they'd remember tiny details about his friends, but couldn't name a single one of mine. The way my mom would stock the fridge with Zach's favorite snacks, but forget mine every single time. They weren't physically abusive or anything that obvious. Nothing I could point to and say, that's messed up. To an outsider, it was death by 1,000 cuts. The constant message that I was less important, less valuable, less worthy of attention or care. So, I stopped asking for things. Just wasn't worth the hassle. Need new shoes because mine have holes? Better save up my own money. Want to join a school club? Better figure out my own transportation. They called me ungrateful when I didn't thank them for Zach's hand-me-downs that didn't even fit. Like, I should be praising them for giving me jeans that were 3 inches too short. Thanks for the floods. Really appreciate it. Zach knew exactly how the system worked. And he played it like a pro. He'd mess up, blame it on me, and they'd back him every time. No questions asked. I once got banned from the family computer for breaking it. Turned out Zach had downloaded a bunch of sketchy games that crashed the hard drive. He laughed about it later when we were alone. They always believe me, he said, not even trying to hide it. Must be nice. I remember this one time I was trying to do homework in the living room. Zach came in and wanted to watch TV. Within 5 minutes, my mom told me to go study in your room because I was distracting Zach. It was my fault for existing in the same space. I guess this wasn't a one-off. This was Tuesday. When I got my driver's license, I had to borrow a neighbor's car for the test because my parents wouldn't let me use theirs. Said I might crash it. 2 weeks later, Zach dented their SUV backing into a pole. My dad laughed it off. Called it a learning experience. When I pointed out the double standard, my mom sent me to my room for being divisive. Classic. The crazy thing is, I wasn't even asking for special treatment, just, basic parental interest. When I made the soccer team, my dad showed up to exactly 0 games. But he never missed one of Zach's football games. Not one. I quit after a season. What was the point? So, I became pretty good at fading into the background. Became the guy who was just there, not making waves, not asking for attention, just existing on the edges of my own life. I had a few friends, but I never brought them home. Too embarrassing to let them see the family dynamic up close. By high school, I was spending as much time away from home as possible. Got a part-time job at 16 just to have an excuse to be gone. Saved every penny. Had this calendar where I marked off days until graduation. Not because I was excited about college or whatever, but because it meant I could finally get the hell out of that house. The weirdest part is how normal it all seemed at the time. Like, this was just my life. This was how families worked. It took me years to realize that wasn't actually how it's supposed to be. Only one person in my entire family ever gave a damn about me. My grandfather. Walter wasn't the warm, fuzzy type. Didn't say much. Wasn't big on hugs or heart-to-hearts. But he noticed things. Actually paid attention in a way no one else bothered to. He'd show up at random times with exactly what I needed, never making a big deal about it. When I was 13, trying to fix my bike with the wrong tools, he just appeared in our driveway with this old toolbox. "Thought you might need these," he said. No lecture about asking for help or whatever. Just practical support. There was this time in freshman year when the school was doing this overnight trip to some science museum. Cost like $120. Not a fortune, but my parents said they already spent the activities budget on Zach's football camp. I didn't even bother arguing. Just told my teacher I couldn't go. Grandpa found out somehow. Probably overheard my mom talking. He slipped me an envelope with exactly $120 cash. For school, was all he said. Didn't ask for thanks. Didn't tell my parents. Didn't make me feel like I owed him. When I was 14, I got really into photography. My parents called it a waste of time. Said I should focus on practical skills instead. But Grandpa showed up one day with a real camera, not brand new, but way better than what I had. Said he found it in storage, but I could tell it was recently purchased. He taught me how to use it. Spent hours showing me settings and techniques. Never made a big deal about it, just quietly encouraged me. Another time, I got stranded after a school event when my parents forgot to pick me up. It was pouring rain late at night, middle of winter. I called home 3 times. No answer. Finally called Grandpa. He drove 40 minutes to get me. Didn't complain once. Just handed me a towel, cranked up the heat in his car, and asked if I was hungry. We stopped for burgers on the way home. He never mentioned it to my parents. Never made me feel like a burden. I remember one Thanksgiving, everyone was going around saying what they were thankful for. Standard cheesy holiday stuff. My dad said something about Zach's bright future. My mom talked about my dad's recent promotion. Zach said something about his football scholarship prospects. When it got to me, I mumbled something generic about family. Grandpa was last. He looked right at me and said, "I'm thankful for Noah's help fixing my deck last month. Couldn't have done it without him." It was small, but it was the first time anyone had acknowledged my existence at a family gathering in years. The weird thing was he never badmouthed my parents. Never said they shouldn't treat you like that or anything. He just quietly compensated for what they weren't doing. Like he knew the score but wasn't going to waste time talking about it when he could be actually helping instead. So I kept my head down, worked part-time through high school, got decent grades, earned my own way into college. No help from my parents. They didn't even come to orientation. My mom texted me good luck the morning I moved out. That was it. My dad didn't even say goodbye. Was on an important call when I left. Big surprise. Grandpa was the only one who helped me move into my dorm. Drove me the 3 hours to campus, helped carry all my stuff up 4 flights of stairs. Elevator was broken, naturally. Before he left, he handed me an envelope with $500 cash. "Emergency fund," he said. "Don't tell your parents." It was more. Even after they doubted me, nothing really changed with my parents. Calls on birthdays and Christmas, maybe generic texts asking if I was doing well in school. But the distance didn't bring any clarity or regret on their part. I was still the extra, the afterthought, the box they checked off so they could say they had 2 kids. I spent years assuming I'd always be the one left out, the one nobody remembered. Until the day everything flipped, and in the way none saw coming. My grandfather died a year ago. Quiet funeral, no speeches, no fanfare, just a handful of relatives and a priest. My parents managed to make even that about Zach. Somehow kept talking about how hard Walter's death was for him. Even though Zach barely visited the old man twice a year, it should have ended there. Some final family obligation. But a week later, I got a call from the lawyer handling his estate. He asked me to come in for the reading of the will. Didn't think much of it at the time. Boy, was I in for a surprise. At first, I assumed the whole thing was just a formality. Maybe Grandpa left me his old tools or some books or whatever. You know, the kind of personal stuff people don't want strangers throwing out after they die. I wasn't expecting anything major. But when I walked into that lawyer's office and saw my parents and Zach already sitting there, I knew something was up. My mom gave me that tight-lipped fake smile she reserves for public appearances. My dad didn't even look at me, just stared straight ahead. Zach was scrolling through his phone like he was bored out of his mind already. The lawyer didn't waste time with small talk. Just shuffled some papers, adjusted his glasses, and went through some basic legal jargon that I barely paid attention to. Then he got to the actual will reading. Here's where things got weird. To my grandson, Noah James Carter, I leave the entirety of my estate, including but not limited to my primary residence at 1420 Oakwood Drive, all bank accounts and investments, my vehicle, and all personal possessions contained within my home. That was it. Everything. The whole enchilada, not split, not shared. No one said anything at first. The room went dead silent. I think we were all still processing what just happened. My mom was trying to figure out if this was some elaborate joke. My dad sat there frozen. Zach finally looked up from his phone and asked the lawyer to repeat what he'd just said. "This can't be right," my mom finally said. "There must be some mistake." The lawyer shook his head. "No mistake. The will was updated 6 months ago. Mr. Carter was very clear about his wishes. 6 months ago. Who advised him to make these changes?" The lawyer glanced at his notes. "No one advised him, Mr. Carter. He requested the meeting himself and was very clear about his intentions. He was old," my mom insisted. "He wasn't thinking clearly. On the contrary, he was completely sound mind. I've worked with him for 20 years. He knew exactly what he was doing." Zach spoke up. "This is Grandpa wouldn't do this." The lawyer just slid a document across the table. His signature witnessed by myself and my associate. Video recording of the signing is available if needed. Zach looked at me like this was somehow my fault, like I'd engineered this whole thing behind everyone's backs. Truth was, I was just as shocked as they were. The meeting wrapped up pretty quick after that. The lawyer gave me a folder with all the paperwork, deed to the house, account information, keys, everything. My parents didn't say a word as we left the office. That silence was scarier than yelling would have been. It lasted until we hit the parking lot. Then my dad turned to me. "You know what the right thing to do is," he said it like it wasn't a question. Like there was only one possible interpretation of what had just happened. He kept going. "The fair thing would be to split it. Zach's the older brother. He was closer to your grandfather, which was complete BS. I was the one who brought Grandpa groceries every week when my parents forgot. I showed up when he had that fall 2 years back and needed someone to take him to the doctor. I fixed things around his house when they broke. Zach only showed his face on holidays and only when food or gifts were involved. We'll discuss this at home," my mom said, giving me a look that used to scare me as a kid as a family. I nodded, not committing to anything. We all drove home separately. I needed time to think anyway. Walking into my apartment that night, I kept turning it over in my head. Why would Grandpa do this? Why leave everything to me and nothing to anyone else? It didn't make sense. Sure, we got along, but this was extreme. This was the kind of thing that tears families apart. Though, to be fair, our family wasn't exactly close-knit to begin with. I spent that night going through the paperwork. The house was worth around $350,000. Not a mansion or anything, but a solid 3-bedroom in a decent neighborhood. The savings and investments added up to another $200,000. The car was a 2015 Toyota that had been well maintained. All told, it was way more than I'd ever expected to have at 27. The next morning, the text started. "My mom, we need to talk about yesterday." My dad, "Call me ASAP." Zach, "WTF, man." I ignored them all. Needed more time to process this whole situation. It was Saturday, so I drove over to Grandpa's house. My house now, I guess. Weird thought. Everything looked exactly the same as the last time I'd visited him about 2 weeks before he died. Same furniture, same photos on the walls. Same coffee mug still sitting on the kitchen counter. I walked through each room slowly, seeing it all with new eyes. This place that had always been a refuge was now mine. All the times I'd escaped here when home got too tense. All the quiet afternoons helping Grandpa with projects or just sitting reading while he watched his shows. It felt right being here, but also empty. My phone kept buzzing. Ignored it. Whatever storm was brewing, I wasn't ready to face it yet. Over the next few weeks, my family launched what I can only call a full-scale pressure campaign. They started slow, strategic texts, voicemails, little reminders about how family sticks together, like they'd ever stuck by me before. My mom's first approach was to play the sad, confused parent. We just want to understand what happened, Noah. Sure you are. Same people who couldn't be bothered to call when I had surgery last year were suddenly worried about me. Funny how money creates instant concern. My dad tried a different angle. Mr. Businessman decided to appeal to my sense of legacy and family heritage. Called me one night going on about how Carter men have always treated each other with respect and how this was about keeping the family intact. Respect only seemed to flow in one direction in our family. My mom started texting daily, sometimes twice. She'd switch between guilt trips and weird attempts at nostalgia. She even had the nerve to bring up how much they'd sacrificed for me over the years. We gave you everything, Noah. Like basic food and shelter was some huge favor they'd done me. Last I checked, that was literally the minimum legal requirement for having a kid. Then my dad took a different approach. Showed up at my apartment unannounced one evening, all smiles and fake concern. Then casually mentioned how they were planning to help Zach with a down payment on a house and this inheritance would really make that easier. When I didn't take the bait, his whole face changed. Dropped the act completely. This isn't what Walter would have wanted, he said, his voice hard. He'd be disappointed in your selfishness. Rich, coming from the guy who visited his own father maybe twice a year, tops, and only when he needed something. Zach was the worst of all. He actually posted photos of himself with Grandpa on social media, acting devastated, tagging it with stuff like, missing you every day and your favorite grandson. Pure performance. This is the same guy who complained about having to visit Grandpa on Christmas because it cut into his party time. Then he'd text me private messages like, you know, I'm the one who should have that house. Don't be a jerk. Another one, you've always been jealous of me. This is pathetic, even for you. And my personal favorite, you must have manipulated him somehow. No way he'd pick you over me if he was thinking straight. The crazy part is they didn't even try to hide their real motivations. It was about control, about money. They were absolutely furious that for once I had something they couldn't touch, something they thought belonged to Zach by default. My mom tried the crying approach again, called me sobbing one night about how they'd always tried their best and didn't understand why I was punishing them. When that didn't work, she started reaching out to mutual family friends, telling them I was mentally unstable and making poor decisions. Got a call from my aunt asking if I was okay, saying my mom told her I was having some kind of breakdown. Classic. Can't control me directly, so try to undermine me to everyone else. And the worst part, they barely cared about Grandpa when he was alive. 2 visits a year tops. One was Christmas, where they'd stay for exactly 2 hours before finding an excuse to leave. The other was usually some passive-aggressive dinner where my mom would complain about how much he was slipping or how grumpy he'd become. I don't remember a single time they ever did anything for him without an ulterior motive. So after 3 weeks of guilt-tripping, gaslighting, and shameless begging, I did the one thing they never expected. I cut them off completely. Blocked their numbers, removed them from social media, changed the locks on Grandpa's house, didn't send an announcement, no grand exit, just silence. They went nuts, of course, but I was tired. Those first couple of months in Grandpa's house were peaceful, quiet. I fixed up the place slowly, working on it every weekend. No pressure, no one breathing down my neck. I got a promotion at work. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to win anyone's approval. I was just living. But if there's one thing I learned about my family over the years, it's that they don't give up when they're losing. They wait. They calculate. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to find out just how far they were willing to go. It didn't take long for the silence to break. Barely 3 months had passed since I'd cut contact, and already my family was back with a vengeance. I came home from work one evening, absolutely beat from a 10-hour shift, just wanting to chill. Instead, I found 3 familiar faces waiting on the front porch of what was now my house. My parents and Zach. I didn't even make it up the steps before my mom started in, arms crossed, that strange smile that always meant trouble. She called me sweetheart, like we were picking up a Sunday brunch conversation. But the 4th person was new, a woman in a sharp gray suit holding a leather portfolio. Lawyer vibes all over her. She said she was here to mediate a discussion regarding the estate. No one said the word contest yet, but that was obviously where this was headed. Zach didn't bother pretending to be civil. He leaned against the railing like he already owned the place, barely glancing at me as I approached. He wasn't just here to support them. He fully believed the inheritance was his. He'd been raised to think the world owed him everything, and no one had ever corrected him. You've been milking this long enough, he said. That familiar condescending tone in his voice. You barely even saw Grandpa toward the end. My mom jumped in calling it a misunderstanding. Said Grandpa must have been confused when he made the will. My dad stayed quiet until the end. He only speaks when he thinks it'll land. Told me to think about what your grandfather would have wanted. Like the will wasn't signed, notarized, and delivered under full legal clarity. I didn't engage. No argument, no back and forth. I told them there was nothing to discuss. Walked to the door and stepped inside without another word. They stayed out there for a few minutes. I could hear Zach complaining, probably about how ungrateful I was, then tires on gravel gone. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not from stress, weirdly enough, just clarity. It was never about fairness. It wasn't grief. They couldn't stand that I had something they couldn't control. And this wasn't over. This was just the opening move. The envelope came 3 days later. Certified mail, law firm letterhead. No surprises, just confirmation. My parents and Zach were officially contesting the will. The wording was polite, but it read like a threat. They claimed my grandfather had been under undue influence when he changed the will. Said I isolated him, played on his emotions, turned him against the rest of the family. They were asking for the inheritance to be split, or even better, handed entirely to Zach as the rightful heir. The way they were believing their own BS was actually impressive. I sat at the kitchen table going through the paperwork page by page. According to them, Grandpa wasn't thinking clearly. I had manipulated him. I called the lawyer who had handled the estate. Someone Grandpa trusted for years. Her name was Janet. She wasn't surprised. I was wondering when they'd make a move, she said. They didn't take the will well, but it's airtight. I drafted it myself. Signed, witnessed, documented. Nothing they've filed so far has any teeth. I asked if they could still make this expensive. She didn't lie. They can drag it out, she said. They can waste your time. Your money. That's usually how this works. I knew what that meant. This wasn't about winning. They just wanted to wear me down until I gave up something, anything. It wasn't a legal fight. It was psychological warfare. So, I treated it like one. I started pulling records, old bank statements, health records, notes Grandpa had written on envelopes and scraps of paper. I checked every drawer, every folder, every locked cabinet in the house. I made copies of everything. I scanned and backed them up twice. And while I was at it, I started digging deeper into their world. I knew my parents had always lived like they were better off than they really were. New furniture every few years, weekend getaways, upgrades they couldn't really afford. But I didn't know the numbers until I started connecting the dots. Credit card balances, missed payments, refinanced loans, a second mortgage. They weren't just living above their means. They were floating on borrowed time. And with Grandpa gone, the safety net had snapped. That's why they wanted the money. They were drowning in their own poor choices, and they expected me to jump in and pull them out. Well, I didn't. Zach, of course, didn't stay quiet. He posted something vague online about being stabbed in the back and fake people who steal what doesn't belong to them. Same old pattern. He screws up, plays victim, then waits for someone to pat him on the back. I discovered more as I kept digging. Pulled every box, folder, and envelope my grandfather left behind. His filing system was old school. Paper, everything, but it was tight. Inside a drawer labeled private, I found loan records my parents had borrowed from him for years. Not gifts, actual loans, written amounts, dates, no repayments. There were 5 separate entries tied to Zach. One for a used car, one marked education, and a few vague ones listed as support, all signed. Grandpa kept every receipt. I scanned it all and backed it up. I sent everything to Janet. She compiled a response. Documentation, loan summaries, bank statements. Then she sent it to their attorney. No arguments, just proof. The next morning, their lawyer called mine with a settlement offer. They wanted 60%, called it a compromise. We rejected it without counter. I didn't respond to their messages. I kept my head down and focused on the case. I wasn't going to roll over because they said I should. They'd started a war. I was just finishing it. Then I found the thing that struck me like lightning. I was still in cleanup mode. Organizing papers, scanning documents, boxing up old files in the back room of the house. My grandfather didn't throw much away. Most of it was boring. Bank slips, tax returns, appliance warranties from the early 2000s. Then I found a locked drawer at the bottom of his old office cabinet. The key was taped under the drawer itself. Of course it was. Classic old man move. Inside was a single manila folder. No label. I opened it on the desk without thinking. Just figured it was some old business stuff. First thing I pulled out was a letter. Handwritten. No date. Just my name at the top. My name. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And there's something you deserve to know. All right. I opened it and froze. Below the letter was a DNA test. Real official looking lab name. Sealed results. 2 names on it. His and mine paternal match. I had to read it 3 times before it stopped looking fake. I honestly thought it was a mistake or maybe a prank. Like, what? Grandpa wasn't Grandpa. He was my actual dad. I just sat there, not even thinking, just staring at the words like they'd rearranged themselves into something normal. Then I actually laughed out of pure confusion. I thought maybe I was misunderstanding what I was reading, like maybe this was some medical screw-up or a joke I wasn't in on. But no, there it was. Bold text, full match, 99.99%. He wasn't my grandpa. He was my father. Everything just kind of paused. My brain didn't know what to do with it. I sat back in the chair just holding the paper. None of it made sense. I wasn't angry. It just didn't fit. The man I thought was my father, cold, stiff, distant. That guy was never really my dad and the one person in my family who treated me like I mattered. Turns out he wasn't just being nice to a neglected grandson. He was trying to be a father from the sidelines the whole time. But why? How? It was too hard to process it all at once. I had so many questions. But then I went back to the letter. Walter wrote that years ago, mid-60s, somewhere in that time, he got involved with a younger woman. She ended up pregnant and didn't want to raise a kid alone. He didn't want to nuke his name, business, or reputation by admitting to an affair that late in life. So, he went to his son, my dad, and offered a deal. Raise the kid, keep it quiet. In return, you'll be taken care of later. They agreed. He didn't go into detail, but said it fell apart fast. My parents resented me early. My mom never wanted me there in the first place. My dad stuck to the deal only because he thought it would pay off. Zach, of course, was treated like royalty. I was just the silent cost of a bad family trade. Walter admitted he stayed distant because he thought giving me a family, even a fake one, was better than raising me alone. Said he knew by the time I was a kid that it was a mistake, but by then it was too late. He wrote that he watched how they treated me over the years. Said he noticed the way I got ignored, blamed, sidelined. Said he thought about stepping in more than once, but didn't. Not until the end. Everything I gave you in the will, I gave it to my son. The only one in this family who didn't lie, steal, or expect something for nothing. That was the last line. I read the letter again and again. I was just stuck in that weird mental zone where nothing makes sense, but somehow everything kind of does. Stuff started lining up in my head. Why my parents were always cold. Why they treated me like a burden. Why Grandpa was always there in small ways, checking in, helping out, covering for things without ever drawing attention. I wasn't their kid. I was his. It didn't feel real, but it also explained a lot. I remembered that time in 3rd grade when a teacher asked us to do a family tree project. I'd spend hours on it, drawing pictures, writing little facts about each person. When I showed it to my parents, my dad just glanced at it and said, "You got your grandfather's birthday wrong." No praise, no interest. I fixed it and showed it to Grandpa later. He studied every detail, asked me questions about it, told me I did a good job, hung it on his fridge for months. That weird comment my mom made once during a fight with my dad, "He's more your father's problem than yours anyway." I'd thought she meant I was too much like my grandfather. Turns out she meant I was literally his problem. I was the living, breathing evidence of something they wanted to forget, something they'd been paid to deal with. And the inheritance wasn't just Grandpa playing favorites. It wasn't even really about money. It was the only way he could finally acknowledge me as his son without causing a scandal. It was his last chance to make things right. I put the documents back in the folder, locked the drawer, slid it shut. The court case was still active. They were still trying to strip the house, the account, everything from me, all while knowing I wasn't even their son. That changed the entire game. And they had no idea what was coming. I made copies of the DNA test and the letter. Kept the originals locked up safe. I didn't tell anyone yet, not even Janet, my lawyer. I needed time to think, to plan my next move carefully. I thought about revealing everything right away, calling them out, throwing it in their faces. But that wouldn't help. I had to be patient. The hearing landed 2 weeks after I found the letter and DNA results. I didn't mention it to anyone until the day before. In the courtroom, my parents were already there when I arrived. My mom didn't even look at me. Dad gave me that same disgusted expression he always used. Zach looked offended. Their lawyers started with the same routine they'd been pushing for weeks, that the will was tampered with, that I had manipulated my grandfather, that Walter hadn't been of sound mind when he made the changes. Janet didn't waste time. She brought out the certified will, the signatures, the video footage from the signing meeting that confirmed Walter was clear, sharp, and deliberate about everything he was doing. She brought out the financial history, the unpaid loans, the dependency patterns, the fact that Walter had already reduced support for the rest of the family before changing the will. Then she dropped the envelope. Inside was the DNA test. She explained it clean. The will didn't just go to a random grandson. It went to his actual son. My mom shifted in her seat. My dad stared straight ahead. Zach looked stunned. Then he looked at me and I could see it hit. This wasn't just about money anymore. He'd spent his whole life thinking I was beneath him. A spare. And now he had to sit there and listen to a court confirm that I had more claim to the Carter name than he ever did. Their lawyer tried to recover. Claimed the DNA test was irrelevant to the case, but the judge wasn't having it. He asked my parents directly if they were aware of this paternity situation. My dad's face said it all. He knew he'd always known. The judge didn't say much after that. He didn't have to. The ruling was quick. Case closed. That was it. Just a final legal stamp that said, officially, they lost. They walked out without a word. I didn't follow. I stayed behind to sign a few final documents, then left. They had tried every angle. Guilt, legal pressure, reputation games, and they still lost. Not just because the will was solid, but because the truth they'd buried for decades finally came out and wrecked whatever fantasy they'd been holding on to, and now I had everything they wanted and none of the baggage. It's been about 4 months since the court ruling. Things had gone quiet. No texts, no emails, nothing from them. I figured they finally decided to move on. Honestly, I didn't care what they were up to. I was working, fixing up the house, minding my business. Life was decent. Then one morning, they showed up. But this time they looked like hell. I was outside patching up a side fence when their car pulled into the driveway. Both of them stepped out, my mom and dad, but no Zach. I stood by the fence and waited. They walked up without asking. No small talk, no fake smiles this time. My mom was doing most of the talking. Bills, debt, no one left. Zach bailed. Of course he did. They were going through a rough time. My dad chimed in halfway through, said they were in a tough spot, and figured I might be able to help. No apology. They weren't here to fix anything, just to see if I'd play savior now that their golden kid walked out. I let them talk. I didn't say much. I finally said, so now you're here for the backup plan. That's not fair, Noah, my mom said, her voice cracking. We're still your parents. We raised you? No, I said simply. Walter raised me. You just housed me. The silence stretched between us. 25 years of pretending, lying, cold indifference, all compressed into that single moment. We have nowhere else to go, my dad finally said, his pride visibly crumbling. Zach took everything and left. We're your family. The only one you have. The man who had watched me grow up knowing I wasn't his son, who had treated me like garbage, a burden, a mistake. No, I said, you're not my family. You never were. I just told them I wasn't interested in helping them clean up a mess they spent years building. I reminded them they made it very clear who mattered in the family. That's the team they picked. And now that he's gone, it's not my job to step in. They stood there and didn't know what to say. My dad just kind of stared like he was waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. I told them I had stuff to do and went back to the fence. They stood there for another minute, then left. Haven't seen or heard from them since. So yeah, that's how it ended. They came back, not because they wanted to make things right, but because they ran out of options. And I was supposed to be the fallback plan. Again, didn't happen. Now it's just me, the house, and peace and quiet. No more trying to prove anything. No more dealing with people who only show up when they need something. They picked their side a long time ago. Now they can live with that choice and I'm good right where I am. And that's it. Reddit, thanks so much for reading. If you want to ask anything in the comments, I'll try to respond to each one.